Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. I hope you're doing well out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great. Appreciate you stopping by. So, I wanted to get to something that was said this week by an absolute legend, the Heat GOAT himself, DWade, who had some comments on Kevin Durant not joining the Miami Heat on his podcast on the Y Network. They were discussing the free agency and the trades that were going on. And it was interesting because DWade had some pretty pointed comments, not only about the whole Durant pursuit and how many times the Miami Heat have tried to go after Kevin Durant and why this may be a little bit of a sore spot for DWade in this in the timeline that is his entire career, because he said an interesting thing when they were discussing the idea that he ended up in Houston. And, you know, certainly this was not something that I took well at the beginning of the week. You know, now that we've had some time to separate and we've gone into the midst of this week, I'm still not pleased that Kevin Durant's not on the Miami Heat. Don't get me wrong. But I've obviously chilled out from the time that has been since Monday. Whenever the hell the trade went. I guess it was Sunday at the Panthers parade is when we found out. I was elated at the Panthers parade, so I've had some time to soak it in and get ready for, whatever the hell the next move is for Miami. I don't know what it is. It appears right now like the next piece of business is Andrew Wiggins. There was some more Andrew Wiggins fodder this week surrounding the Lakers. There's some counter reports saying, hey, that's not so close. The other name that got kicked around today, I believe it was from Mike Scotto of Hoops Hyper Clutch Points. I forget where he works. Sorry, Scotto. But he said that Andrew Wiggins is garnering interest from the Milwaukee Bucks. That is another team. There's also a lot of Warriors buzz as far as like the Warriors wanting to get some perimeter. So could there be a reunion there? If this Kuminga stuff is real, would that be it? I know in his same report he's saying like, no, that's not a match made, but it would seem like a pretty obvious switch. It's just a matter of, do the Miami Heat really want to pay Jonathan Kuminga? Talked about this a little bit in the Davion video, but there are reports that he wants $30 million a year. Seems pretty steep. Seems pretty steep for somebody who you're basically, making the coronation. There's a lot of like Kings stuff that's starting to get out there, and Bulls. Like, to me, those teams almost make a little bit more sense just because of where their teams are at, where their salaries are at. I could see a Kuminga Vucevic swap pretty easily. That seems to make a lot of sense for at least the Golden State side of like, what would they want in a sign and trade? I don't really know what Miami, other than Andrew Wiggins, I don't really know what they want. I suppose Duncan Robinson, but I don't know if Duncan Robinson, we don't even know. I mean, Duncan Robinson could be a free agent tomorrow for all we know. But as far as Wiggins getting interest from the Bucks, their salaries are just a little bit strange right now, because I was like, all right, well, what do they have in this just for a straight up deal? And, right now what's on the books, you got Bobby Portis on a player option for about $13.5 million. So, there's that if he opts in. Pat Connaughton at 9.4, and then the other contract that's in that range is Kyle Kuzma, who makes $23 million this year and $21 next year. And I'd rather, honestly, just as a straight up player versus player, I think I'd rather have Andrew Wiggins than Kyle Kuzma. I don't really understand what would really be the purpose of that move. I think, from the standpoint of, I would get why the Heat want to move on from Andrew Wiggins, and it's certainly in a case of like, you're going to get an expiring deal, but to get somebody who's also going to eat into the salary for next year just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't really understand that one from a Heat perspective. So the Bucks, while all right, they're out there, it does seem like a bit of a weird match. Brook Lopez isn't under contract with them, and then you got Giannis and you got Dame. Obviously, they're not going to trade Giannis for Wiggins, at least you don't think they are. And then Damian Lillard's got the torn Achilles. So I just think it's a little bit of a weird match. I guess you could do a 3-team deal, but just straight up looking at, a Heat Bucks swapperoo, it's a little bit weird. So just there's that regard. But Dwyane Wade went on his podcast, the Y Network, and he was talking about Kevin Durant. And he said, the Heat have been trying to get KD for 10 years. It's one of the reasons why I ain't blank no more, because they went out this summer and were like, hey, we're going to try and get KD. So do you want him or do you not want him? Right now, they're just playing a couple of games, and they're not going to turn in their chips until they feel like they have a winner. They didn't want to give up with what was offered for KD to come there. And the Heat look at the age, they look at injury, they look at a lot of things. And as a Heat fan, you just can't be too mad. I also understand what they're doing. I said this 10 years ago when the Heat were trying to get him. He's not following LeBron. Why are we recruiting somebody who's not going to do that? I didn't like it then, and I didn't like it now. I'm glad he's in Houston. That ain't it. I don't want to be one of those old dudes who can't come back and get celebrated. Heat, get this bleep together. So, look, if you guys remember the history of this, this was not a great time for the Heat and DWade's relationship. Remember, there was a lot of frostiness with LeBron leaving, a lot of Pat Riley frostiness with LeBron leaving, and there was a lot of incorrect animosity from the franchise, especially Pat being put on Dwyane because the Heat felt blindsided. And back then, you can go back and look at the video. There was this famous video back in the day of Dwyane Wade on the tarmac with LeBron James, and they're having this long animated conversation where it very much seemed like a goodbye, but DWade didn't know, or didn't directly know, and didn't let anybody from the Heat franchise know. And he eventually, of course, ends up going to Cleveland. We all know the breakup story, right? And it was always felt like, for some reason, the Heat, and particularly Pat, had this weird set of blame or animosity they had at DWade because they were blindsided. And, mind you, DWade comes back. Chris Bosh gets the Uber Max because Houston's pursuing him. DWade, we're going to make it good. And then we get to this summer of 16 where they max out Hassan Whiteside, who's getting pursued by the Dallas Mavericks. And they were going to go after Kevin Durant. He has this big thing in the Hamptons, and the Celtics are going after the Cap. Had a huge boom this year. People were making crazy money. Tyler Johnson got a huge extension. Mozgov was getting max money. It was just crazy, the amount of money. And Hassan Whiteside got this $100 million deal because, he was this G League sensation that comes out there, and the Heat, boom, basically take care of him at midnight. It's done. And then they're going to have this pursuit of Kevin Durant, and they always kind of felt like, hey, D-Wade, you're on the back burner, right? D-Wade's not going to go anywhere. We're going to make it good, right? And, it built, I think, for Dwyane a lot of hostility because, how can you try and expect to recruit Kevin Durant to the Miami Heat without having Dwyane Wade on board? It's just weird. You're not going to be in this spot where you're going to feel like you have an actual chance to go get this guy while your franchise player isn't in this position where he wants to help you recruit. And so it's like they're trying to get KD, and they're forgetting about the guy who's the furnace of all things they've done that is great. Now, mind you, also on the back end of this, and I don't know if this has anything to do with Dwyane Wade saying, because he is just, I know what it's like to be on a microphone. You just kind of rant and you have a take. So I don't know how genuine this is or not. But let's not forget, there was a little bit of a tit for tat back in the day in the Big Three era. These were these were the teams. The Heat and the Thunder were looked upon as like, and the Spurs eventually overtook the Thunder. But like when you got to that 2012 and KD's at the peak of his power, not even really the peak of his powers as like the individual guy before he ends up going to Golden State, ends up getting the MVP in 14. But there was a time where he took issue with like a top 10 list that Dwyane was still on. And he, I believe, said something to the effect is that, oh, James Harden should be on that list, not Dwyane Wade. Now, mind you, this was Dwyane Wade fresh off of the Miami Heat kicking their ass in the finals. Like, gentleman sweep, Heat in 5, DWade sending Kevin Durant crying into his mother's arms as a young man. And it was actually, this was the Instagram post still up. 9/24/13. Kevin Durant said James Harden should be replaced me in the top 10. Note to self, make him respect your place in history, ... again. And that was, so September of 2013. Heat obviously, would go on to get one more finals. So this was actually, I guess this would be a year after winning the finals. So they had already beaten him in the finals. And then they were back-to-back champions. And he's sitting here saying, oh, no. James Harden should be in the top 10, not Dwyane Wade. And then Kevin Durant back then said, show me, don't tweet me. And actually, you know what I forgot to do? I wanted Kevin Durant on the Heat. And I just happened to I was just doing some like rabbit hole stuff here, looking back at the old Twitter beef from 12 years ago. And Kevin Durant, the tweet's still up, show me, don't tweet me. And I actually tweeted on that. Back in the day when you had to put you couldn't even comment tweet. You had to put RT, Kevin Durant's tweet, show me, don't tweet me. And it's a picture of him crying into his parents' arms. And it's a good thing he's not on the Heat. Otherwise, I would have had to delete something like that. Whoops. But look, man, this was, I don't know if it ended up being a beef, because I know there's been respect. DWade said, hey, the guy deserves a statue one day. I think, Kevin Durant said this guy is my, I think there's been probably a thawing of the frostiness. But one thing I do know is, as much as DWade has love for the Heat and all that stuff, that man does not forget beefs. And he doesn't, he'll forgive, but he won't forget. And so I do think there's a little element to him that has a little PTSD of, hey man, this Kevin Durant thing brings up something in me that I don't like, because it makes me think of probably one of the most unhappy times professionally in my career. And also a guy that this James Harden, DWade thing, I don't know how much Dwyane has I don't know how much he bought into it in his career, but certainly has made remember the whole you can't get to that floor thing? We all know it's it's this weird obsession. It's like Twitter basketball as opposed to winning basketball that people have tried to fall in love with. And so for Kevin Durant to kind of be the first guy to throw it out there in the ether, oh, James Harden should replace Dwyane as a top 10 player. And look, James Harden ended up having some great years. He could kick rocks with the argument because, he never won anything. But, he ended up winning an MVP. So you want to say KD was right? That's fine. You could be that. But, he'll never be in D-Wade's class. In my mind, as a Heat fan, D-Wade being the GOAT. But I can think that D-Wade, if there's ever a KD Heat discussion, my guess is it just brings up something in D-Wade that he doesn't like very much. It's not that he has real hate towards Kevin Durant, or that he has real animosity towards Kevin Durant or ill will towards Kevin Durant. I just think the idea when he says, I didn't like it then and I don't like it now, it is, to me, as a person who has just takes in sports, I can respect it, because it's just you know what? I get you, D-Wade. Why would you want this guy who you basically is looked upon as one of the exit routes on your breakup with your franchise, where you ended up on the Chicago Bulls and at a time with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Why would you want that guy in your franchise's jersey? And then mentioning that the Heat got to get their bleep together. Like, I mean, you couldn't echo the sentiments either, any more than I have from that. And I think that, he said this last year at a statue ceremony where he was jealous of Boston. He goes like, I want to be back there celebrating with those guys. And I do think there's got to be a part of him where, he's put a lot of expectations on Bam Adebayo. He's put a lot of, he obviously had a lot of thoughts on the breakup with the Jimmy Butler thing, where I think he, towed the line really great between a guy he's got a relationship and a franchise he really cares about. But I do think he leaned more towards, hey, you can't accept behavior like that as an organization. If you stand for something, stand for it. And I do think there's a little bit of him looking at this being like, you used to, because don't forget, one of the things that's impressive about, with Dwyane, and he's talked about this before, about the years where it led up to the big three and then the impatience that it took. It's like, this is a guy who probably looked at an organization that literally was steps ahead of everybody to plot to get that big three together. And it just feels like, that organization, I think, is the same because all the people are the same, but they don't feel like they're operating the same. And so when he says get their bleep together, I think there's probably part of them that's like, wait, you're still getting in the chase for like the whales and doing the old things, and you're kind of being set in your ways. Like, you're still pulling the same moves, like, and it's still not working. So yeah, playing a little like, pop psychologist on it. I think that's why it kind of drew the ire of DWade this past week from the organization. Look, I was pissed too, but it feels like he's pissed for different reasons than the fans are, or anybody who like looked at this. Even like, you think about like Marcus Morris or Stephen A, or people who came out being like, how could you not give up more for Kevin Durant? And I think DWade is looking at it a little bit in the scope of like, you're still running back to this same idea. Like, it was stupid then. It was, and it's not the way to go now. And so I did find it. I did find the rant very interesting. Go check it out. If you missed it, go check out his podcast. You can go see it. It was a good discussion. I listened to it today when I was on the way to my kids' BJJ class. But yeah, very, very interesting. DWade's still not loving the whole Kevin Durant thing on the Miami Heat. He's glad that it didn't happen.